Well, Sam, thank you for taking the time. Good afternoon. How's your day going aside from having, to do press where you talk about yourself way too much?
It's good. I'm sitting here in the Philip Roth Personal Library in Newark, surrounded by Philip Roth's 7,000 books. I am sitting at his personal writing desk, which is pretty cool for me because I'm a writer myself. I'm a
Yes.
novelist, and Philip Roth has always been my favorite writer. So it's kind of like a dream job.
Yeah, you are a person with many jobs and titles. The novelist, you've received a lot of acclaim for that. You produce stuff that we've heard on Audible, another Newark related entity. You're a podcaster in your own right on a variety of beats, etc. When someone says, "Hey, what do you do for a living, Sam?" Do you have an easy way of calling it or titling it?
You know, my shorthand is that I'm a writer, because I think that kind of covers all of it. I tell people my day job is that I'm the historian at the Newark Public Library. Sorry, at the Philip Roth Personal Library in the Newark Public Library.
Right.
But to me, writer is what I've always considered myself, and it's kind of something that I don't want to sound pretentious, but it's almost more of a calling than a job because frankly you don't make all that much money writing, especially fiction writing. So but it is the thing that I think of first thing when I wake up. I'm working on a novel now. It'll be my third novel, and often the thing I'm thinking of as I'm going to bed is the characters that I'm making up in my own head. So it's my primary, I would say, calling in life is fiction writing. Yeah.
And this is intended to be a compliment, but I think of you along the lines of a Chuck Klosterman or do you say Klosterman or Klosterman?
I say Klosterman. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Klosterman, we're in agreement right there. That you can like intellectual topics and then you can like not so intellectual topics, but then know how to intellectualize those topics that we most people would consider lowbrow. So you kind of run the gamut between highbrow and lowbrow, but it's always relatable when you do it.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'm from Boston. I grew up in the city there and came of age in the 1990s. My first novel, has its highbrow moments, but a lot of it's about my love for the Boston Celtics. A lot of it is there's slang in it. A lot of it's about hip hop and pop culture. So I very much like to swing from the high to the low. And actually, so did Philip Roth. I mean, Philip Roth famously talked about how his two best friends were sheer playfulness and deadly seriousness. And one of the things that I was drawn to about him as a writer is, he comes from Newark. He's a city kid. He grew up here, not far away. He grew up in the Weequahic neighborhood of Newark,
Mm-hmm.
and his books are loaded with street slang. And he would use a $500 word and then use a word like Labans in the next sentence. He'd say he'd punch him in the Labans. So he loved alternating between kind of high rhetoric and street vernacular. Yeah.
So with Newark, I personally started going there maybe '06, '07. There was a concert I saw at the Symphonic Hall. It was really a rock concert, but it was pretending to be sophisticated, but it wasn't. Anyway, that's when I started going there and going, wow, this is really a city. And then you learn about the history of it and you go, okay, so there's big corporations here, there's real deal restaurants, etc. When did you become a Newark person and how did you become a Newark person?
So it's funny. I mean, like I said, Philip Roth has been my favorite writer since I wanted to become a writer, probably in college. So I kind of had Newark in my imagination for years before I actually set foot here. In a way, it was almost like this magical destination because it was the land of my hero, who had written so beautifully about Newark in so many of his books. I mean, Roth wrote 31 books, and the majority of them are set in Newark, at least partially set in Newark. So
Mhm.
it's a funny coincidence. My family, I'm married. I have two young kids. I have an 8-year-old boy and a 5-year-old daughter. And like, almost everyone I know in Brooklyn at a certain point, you can't afford to live there anymore, or, at least you can't afford to live anywhere with space, which is kind of what you need when you have kids. So
Yeah.
my wife and I started looking elsewhere. We'd heard about, I have to admit, a little bit skeptical of New Jersey because it's got this, Sopranos, Jersey Shore, MTV. I'm talking about the MTV show Jersey Shore reputation
Yes.
of, just being, well, what all the stereotypes are. So
Yeah,
we were,
my wife's from the original actual Jersey Shore, and then she's very quick to point out that almost none of the people on the show Jersey Shore are actually from the Jersey Shore.
that's true. That's
So
true.
weird casting.
And by the way, I love a lot of I love that show, frankly, and I love The Sopranos too. And I think I don't want to act like I don't like those kind of people, but certainly New Jersey had that stereotype, and
Yeah.
and frankly, when we started looking at the neighborhoods here, we were like amazed at how nice it was and how much it felt kind of like Brooklyn anyway. So we moved to a town called Maplewood, New Jersey,
Sure.
which is about 15 minutes from here in Newark. And all of our neighbors are from Brooklyn. So we love it, and it's diverse, it's progressive. It really reminds me of Brooklyn. And anyway, so shortly after I moved here, a friend of mine sent me this job listing for the historian position at the Newark Public Library's Philip Roth personal library room. And she said, this is perfect. You live right there. You love Philip Roth. What could be better? So I jumped on it. That's how I'm here. So I didn't start spending time in Newark, frankly, until the past year. But I love this city. I mean, I think it's massively underrated. It is not only does it have, I mean, it has everything you could want. It has Amtrak. It has an amazing international airport. It's got extensive train systems that go all over the rest of New Jersey and go all the way to Philly. It's got major concert venues, athletic
Oh yeah.
stadiums. So it's got everything, and it's frankly it's much more affordable than Jersey City and Hoboken. So I'm kind of in a way I'm kind of happy that it's this well kept secret, because I think it's a wonderful place to work. And I love hanging out here. I love going to Hobbies. That's my go-to lunch spot, which Roth also loved. I think it's the best Jewish deli that I've been to. It's even better than Katz's in New York. So yeah, I love it here in Newark.
And if you want to go see Iron Maiden, you mentioned the concerts, you have to go to Newark. They don't play in New York City anymore. They
Oh,
play
really?
in Newark.
Okay.
So,
I like
so
it.
back to you and what you do. We keep talking about Dr. Philip Roth, because he had what, 6 doctorates, something like that.
He had a lot of honorary degrees. Yeah.
That's not the only prestigious literary thing. Like, hasn't Salman Rushdie spoken at that particular library branch?
Yeah, I mean, so we have an endowed lecture called the Philip Roth Lecture that is our big annual event. We've had so many great lecturers in the past. We started with Zadie Smith, who's one of my favorite novelists. Salman Rushdie, as you said, the great historian Robert Caro, who's been a lot in the news lately because his masterful book about New York City's history, and Robert Moses just celebrated its like 50th anniversary, and it's been reprinted hundreds of times. He was a friend of Roth's. He came and spoke. We had the historian Sean Willentz, who's one of the great Civil War historians, come and speak. So we've had a lot of great people, and I think it's a testament to just how much respect Philip Roth still commands, even though he passed away several years ago.
Right.
In the literary and intellectual world, I mean, it's an honor to speak at this lecture. So we're able to get some great names. Yeah.
What sort of work was needed to transition his collections from just being a bunch of stuff sitting in places to this displayable, visitable, palatable thing? Was it endless, or was it actually somewhat delivered in an easy to view way?
So I've only been here for a year, but I can tell you what I've heard, which is that it was a lot of work. There are 7,000 books here. The books came from Roth's farmhouse in Connecticut, where he spent a lot of his time, and his New York City apartment. He actually had two adjoining apartments in New York City. He had like basically his residence and his writing studio. So they came from all these different places. And it wasn't just like they, packed them up in boxes and just stuck them on random shelves. They actually reproduced the exact order of where the books were in his personal bookshelves. So
Wow.
it's pretty cool. So you have one of the really interesting things, if you actually come to the Philip Roth Personal Library. And by the way, it's open to the public. Anyone can come here. They've got to make an appointment with me, but I don't discriminate. You could be a PhD or just a random Roth fan or whoever. So, but anyone can come here, look in the books, turn the pages, see what Roth wrote in the margins of the books. And one of the cool things is if you come here, you will see that he has certain shelves that are like the research that he did for specific books. So he wrote a book called Plot Against America, which is pretty timely right now because it's about imagining if America was taken over by a fascist movement. And and it was way ahead of its time, I think. And in order to do the research for that book, Roth read dozens and dozens of books about the history of fascism. He read the entire 6-volume, 2,000-page book by Henry Ford about the called like The International Jew, is Henry Ford's anti-Semitic tract that he published back when he was the Elon Musk of his heyday, of his day. And Roth read that whole thing. I mean, he was that dogged, he was that determined and serious of a researcher when he was writing a novel. And I can say, like I'm like most novelists, we do try to read history to do a little research and make sure that we have our facts right. But, 1 or 2 books, not like 50 to 100. But for every book Roth wrote, he would probably read 50 to 100 nonfiction books. His last book was about polio and a polio pandemic in Newark. And, he read dozens of books about polio. I mean, and I'll just give one more funny example. He has like a small scene in his book, The Human Stain, where a guy goes ice fishing at the end of the book. And, most people, they would just Google ice fishing, read about it on Wikipedia so they could, get the terminology right. Roth we have 3 books here on the shelves, and I know that those are the books that he was reading for Human Stain because I know that scene, that are about ice fishing. So he read 3 whole books about ice fishing just to write one short scene and sound like he knew what he was talking about. That's how serious and meticulous he was.
Wow. Well, I have 2 more questions for you, and then I let you go. And the first one is, not only is it a physical collection, which we see some of behind you, but the Roth and Company podcast, you're keeping it ahead in the digital age so that people can experience it from outside of Newark if they're not in the area. The Roth and Company podcast, any idea how long that's going to go for? Will that be a monthly? Will it be whenever there's something special?
Yeah, so we're basically we're going to roll them out every month. The reason why it's coming out so infrequently is because the whole idea of the podcast is we're going to go through all 31 of Philip Roth's books, and that's going to take quite a while. So every time I invite guests, I give them a month to read the book and prepare. And some of his books are long. The next book we're doing, I'm actually recording this tomorrow, is Sabbath Theater. This is a thick book with small print, so so I give the guests a lot of time, but it's a lot of fun. We're having a lot of novelists, journalists, critics, people who aren't just academics. Not that I have anything wrong with that, find anything wrong with academics, but the idea of this is to try to just keep Philip Roth fresh and relevant for the next generation. And I think what is surprising and pleasing to me is just like how much enthusiasm there has been when I reach out to people. How much people still love Philip Roth. I mean, he's not even with us anymore. And there are some who think his books are too controversial, too raunchy, too whatever. But for novelists and writers and people who are serious about books, he's kind of like the king of American literature the past 100 years. I mean, in my opinion, there's no one really close. I mean, he won every single major award except for the Nobel Prize, and a lot of Roth fans think that he was robbed of the Nobel Prize. But his level of productivity to write 31 books and to have most of them be really good and a handful be total timeless masterpieces, it's kind of unheard of. So there's a lot of respect for him and a lot of enthusiasm about the podcast. I'm excited about it. We'll see if we can get through all 31 books.
Fingers crossed. And the last question, bordering on stupidity right here, is who is your favorite lead singer of Van Halen? Is it David Lee Roth or is it Sammy Hagar? Because aren't you on brand with everything Roth?
Well, I'm gonna have to say that's a tough one because my first name is Sam. So as a kid, I was always excited that there was a rock star named Sammy. So I'm gonna go with Sammy Hagar. As a kid, I was embarrassed by the name Sam. I didn't think it was a cool name, and then when I found out there was this awesome rock star with that name, I felt a lot better about my name. So Sammy Hagar.
The Sams are everywhere these days. You see 5-year-olds named Sam. The
Yep.
guy who started Dogfish Head Beer, he's a Sam. I think the Sams are everywhere. Are you starting to see it's a popular name now?
Definitely, and that's my favorite beer company too. So not just because his name is Sam. So
Well, hey, thank you for the great vibes that you're putting out through the community, through the podcast, and looking forward to your next book whenever that is coming, and hope your other podcasts continue. I know it's on hiatus, but any idea if that's coming back soon?
I assume you're talking about the Hey Man podcast, the podcast that's the advice show for men, which was a ton of fun. And me and my buddy Avi, who started that together, every time we have dinner together in the city, he's still living in the city. We talk about bringing it back. So we'll see. We'll see. I'd love to do it. Thanks for bringing it up. Maybe that's the extra push I need to get it back going.
Paltrocast.